Hi everybody, this is Mr. Zoeller, and today I'm going to be presenting you a screencast on the Battle of Gettysburg. So for this video, you should be able to explain students, you should be able to illustrate the events and importance of the Battle of Gettysburg to the Union and Confederacy. So this is going to be the turning point of the American Civil War. So whoever wins this battle is going to have an advantage for the remainder of the war. So here is some information about the Battle of Gettysburg. So in the spring of 1863, the leader of the Confederate Army, General Robert E. Lee, is going to lead his forces into the Union, into the northern states. And his aim was to break the North's will to fight, as well as to gain a victory that would convince other nations to recognize and aid the Confederacy. So in order for some countries to become allies with the Confederacy needed to prove that they could actually invade the Union and defeat them in battle there. And he's also hoping that if he takes over parts of the Union, that would force Abraham Lincoln to basically surrender and allow the Confederacy to be its own country. So in early June 1863, Robert E. Lee cut across northern Maryland into southern Pennsylvania. So once he crosses into Maryland, was it's a border state, and once he gets into Pennsylvania, he's definitely heading up into the north. So his forces gathered west of a town called Gettysburg, and Gettysburg was like a little college town where I think it was a seminary college, so that's where you would go to become a preacher. So Lee was unaware that Union soldiers were encamped closer to town because his cavalry commander, Jeb Stuart, had disobeyed his orders and gone off on a raiding party rather than search for Union soldiers. So as Lee's soldiers moved into the town, they ran right into Union General George Meade's cavalry, triggering the start of the Battle of Gettysburg. And this is going to be a key battle that is finally going to turn the tide against the Confederacy, and that's because they're going to lose this battle, and they're going to be at a big disadvantage for the remainder of the Civil War. So what I'd like you to do for your notes as you're writing these down is, as these next few slides come up, I'd like you to keep a record of what's happening each day by day on there. And so we're going to see day one where the part of the battle is taking place. So here's the town of Gettysburg right here. So the fighting for day one is going to concentrate kind of in the middle area. Who's going to control the high ground? So who's going to have control of the hills, which is going to be very important. Then we'll have day two focusing on the battle at Little Round Top and Big Round Top. And then day three is famously known as Pickett's charge across this field at Cemetery Ridge, and we'll see what the results are of this battle. So for the first day of fighting, the Union forces arrive on horseback. They dig in on top of the two hills south of Gettysburg, and so their plan is just to try to delay the Confederate Army as much as possible for the rest of the Union Army to arrive, and so they try to take the highest elevated ground as possible. So these hills were called Cemetery Ridge and Culp's Hill, and the Confederate soldiers soon quickly surrounded the Union troops. So that's mainly what's happening on the first day of fighting. So you can see here on the map, so the Union Army begins taking over the main hills around Gettysburg, and then the Confederate Army is surrounding them. And so it's basically the Confederacy is going to be forced to attack the Union Army while the Union Army is further up. So being further up on a hill, having higher elevation, allows you to see further, your guns have more range, and also the enemy is going to come to you. So they're going to be marching up the hill, attacking, while the Union troops are going to be staying stationary there. So they're going to be more rested than the Confederate soldiers would be. So on the second day of fighting, so Robert E. Lee is going to order his troops to try to capture the hill called Little Round Top. And so if the Confederates are able to capture this hill, they could then bring cannons up to that hill to fire down on the back side of the entire Union Army. And so if the Union Army is being attacked by the infantry in the front and have cannons firing on them in the back, that's not a good spot to be. And so that was Robert E. Lee's plan for this battle. However, the Confederates were never able to take that hill. So after hours of fighting, the Union soldiers finally managed to hold off the Confederates, and they were able to hold on to that hill. And that's probably going to be one of the most important events of the entire Civil War is going to take place on that second day. So here you can see the hill and kind of the path right here that the Confederate Army would have to take. And so when we talk about, oh yeah, it's a pretty big hill. So it'd be like if you have students, if you've gone over to BC and you're looking over the bluffs there, that's kind of talking about how high this hill would be. And so that's going to give, obviously, the Union Army an advantage to control that type of land. And so here you can kind of see the top here. So here's the Union line. And then let me go back really quick here. And so if the Confederates had won and brought their cannons up here, they would have been able to fire on the back of the Union troops here while the Confederate Army attacked up to it. And so they're trying to sneak around and attack. And so the Union Army that's on the furthest left part, we call it the left flank, they can't surrender and they can't give up. So here we're going to see the Confederate Army attacking, trying to take that hill over here. And the plan was to take it over and then attack here in behind the Union Army, but they failed to do so. So here's a drawing of the men that were defending. So they're from Maine, this group of men that were fighting, and they're led by this man, Colonel Shaw. And so he was a college professor. And so he's going to be a hero, a huge hero of the Civil War. When his men end up running out of ammunition, he orders his men to charge the Confederate Army down the hill with their bayonets, so with their long kind of knives on the end of their rifles. And the Confederate Army is so tired from attacking that they end up driving them all the way back and capturing many of them. And so that's going to be a decisive decision that's going to save the Union Army on the second day of fighting, and we could say for the rest of the Civil War possibly. So on the final day of the Battle of Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee plans an attack on the center, so the middle of the Union's army's line as it stretches from one point to another. And so about 15,000 Confederate troops took part in this charge, so you're going to have a huge chunk of the army that's leading this. So this charge is named after a famous commander, George Pickett. And the problem for the Confederate Army is they're crossing about a mile of kind of open field, and the entire time they're going to be attacked by cannons. And then by the time they reach the line of where the Union troops are, they're going to be really tired, and they're not going to be able to do very well. So fewer than half of these soldiers even reached the Union lines. Only half of them even got there. The rest were killed. And so Pickett's division was almost completely destroyed, and the Confederate Army loses too many men. And so they have to end up retreating here. And so here's a kind of a drawing and picture here of General Pickett here for the Confederate Army. And so here you can see day 3, got the Confederate Army moving in on the center of the line here at Cemetery Ridge, but they're going to be defeated. So here you can see kind of the path they're going to have to take across this open field. So they'll be attacked by the artillery the entire time, and we've already learned about how devastating Civil War weapons were. And so from that point all the way over to the Union line, I mean, it's mostly open field. And once the Confederate Army gets here, only half of them are still alive that attacked, and they're not going to be able to defeat the Union. So what's the big results of this Battle of Gettysburg? So Robert E. Lee is forced to retreat. He doesn't get the victory he wants. The Confederacy lost so many men that they would never again be able to invade the North and the Union. And so the nations they were hoping that would become their allies and help them in this war are not going to do so, because the Confederacy proved that they weren't able to defeat the Union in the North. So in total, the Battle of Gettysburg is the bloodiest battle of the entire Civil War. In these 3 days of fighting, 51,000 men lost their lives. So it's a horrific number of people. And President Lincoln is going to come to the battle site of Gettysburg a few months in the future and give a speech of dedication to the ground that these men died on, and about what they fought for. And so that's going to be called the Gettysburg Address, which we'll cover later.